Power 107.5 Columbus is number one station for hip hop and R&B. You tuned in to Any Given Sunday, the only show that's for you, by you, and we cannot do the show without you. Make sure you hit us up, hashtag AGS Radio Online. You can also add us at Power 107.5. Now, it's been crazy right now. There's been a Ebola scare for a while now, and at first we seen, where they flew a patient into Emory Hospital in Atlanta. We're now seeing a case in Texas. Also, Spain just reported an actual case as well. And so it's kind of getting serious, man. Like once it begins to cross American borders, that's when I guess the red flags go up and people really get scared. SP, what are your thoughts on this right now, man?
Well, it's interesting to me because this has been around since 1976, and now it's a concern. And another thing that's disturbing about this whole thing is they want to compare it to AIDS, the way it's transmitted, because it's through bodily fluids, blood, everything else like that. And it's just another serious disease. It just popped up, and people are starting to pay attention to it because it came over here. But honestly, I don't think it'll break out like that.
Right.
Because when I think of Ebola, I think of anthrax. I think of SARS. Remember those big scares that we used to have about these things that really didn't do anything?
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely is a deadly disease, but I don't think it'll go farther than a pandemic or anything like that.
I think it's the fact that we have to be aware of it, that it is something that you can, be diagnosed with Ebola. But I agree, I don't think it's going to be this big thing, but I think part of the reason why it won't become a really big thing is because we are paying attention to it so early. And with this person in Texas who is diagnosed with it, that's the first case here in the United States. Right. And they do have to take necessary precautions because when those two people were treated in Atlanta, they were in a room that was like that was quarantined for people not to be infected. Texas didn't have those same types of precautions in place. And so I don't think it'll be really widespread, but I do think that it's important for us to look at it and make sure that people know what the symptoms are, that people know like how to interact with someone with the disease, not to be afraid of them and put them in some room where nobody can touch them, but at least we all know how to interact with them and fight the disease. But
technically, wouldn't you? I know me personally, I don't want to be in a room with anybody that has the diseise. Not in a bad way, but at this moment, we don't know that much about the disease,
right.
And there has actually been an outbreak in West Africa, and I know, a good guy sitting here in the studio, Trev-Eaz, was saying that the reason it is broken out in South Africa is they don't have, or West Africa, I'm sorry, is because they don't have the means to actually treat it. But however, I feel like we don't know enough about the disease to really even treat it effectively. And the guy in Texas, I believe that they released him early from the actual hospital without really, making sure that he was free of Ebola and make sure that he was actually, didn't have any symptoms. And he ended up coming back to the hospital maybe a couple days later. So I feel like there has actually been some margins of error when dealing with Ebola. So I guess my question to you, SP, would be, should we stop the flights that are coming from like the West Africas and those places?
No, I don't think it's that serious. And again, it's been around since 1976. I think we do know about it, but we never really had to deal with it. There's never been a cure for it because it's never been. Now that it is, now it's something that we have to address. It's kind of like if you're in a situation and there's some riffraff going on down the street, you're not really worried about it because it's not in your front yard. But when it starts to move closer, then you start having to take those precautions to keep your family safe. I think it's just one of those situations right there. And since people have actually flown overseas from Africa here, the media is having a field day with it. And again, like Elisa said, we have to be aware of this so it doesn't spread wild.
I think it should be serious concern. There's already a man right here right now in America who's hospitalized in the U.S. He's critically ill Liberian man. His name is Thomas Duncan, and he's begun receiving an experimental drug in Dallas. But however, there has been encouraging signs, especially for the young man who was in Liberia or came from Liberia for treatment. I think his name is Ashako Mupo, and he was able to walk off the plane before being loaded onto a stretcher and taken to the ambulance. And so we see people who have it and they're still cognitive, they're still able to move and stuff, and so there's some good signs there. But I don't know, I kind of agree with the flight issue right now, only because we don't have necessarily a real cure for the disease right now.
I think that would be too drastic to stop all the flights, because there's only how many people are in the United States, and we're talking about one person, 2 people, 4 people even. That's not enough to be like, okay, if you come from West Africa, you're not allowed to be here. I think that they could do more screenings. Like I read that the Center of Disease Control is not screening people who travel from countries affected by Ebola. So maybe they could do more screenings. but I don't think it's anything to get all up in arms about because it's only a few people. I mean, and I hate to say that because it's someone's life, you know, we don't want anyone to die, but I don't think we can say, let's stop all the flights from West Africa.
I gotta take a flight this week, and I'm a little worried. I'm always worried.
You should not be worried.
Somebody coughing. Now.
I mean, be worried, but maybe not for Ebola. Like, be worried about somebody coughing next to you,
right?
And be giving you the flu or something, but not Ebola.
I mean, I'm anxious to see how this thing plays out. Now, also in other news, there has been a California mayor who's been shot and killed by his wife, and you know, he's a mayor of Bell Gardens in California, and he was killed during a domestic dispute with his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Now, his wife is saying that, you know, her life was miserable, that he put his hands on her, and then he began a lot of physical abuse to her. And so this was like the last straw, her actually shooting and killing him. And again, it brings back to the forefront this whole conversation about domestic violence. And so what we see here is that the domestic violence situation ends with a man being killed by his wife. I guess at the end of the day, we have to have a conversation about this. We have to begin to talk about this and let people know that this is really happening. People are really having domestic disputes. People are really being killed in relationships. And later on today, we'll be bringing in two counselors who deal with domestic violence treatment, and they usually work with the actual batterer. And that's rare because normally when you have counselors, they're usually talking to the person who was a victim of it. Mm-hmm. But they're kind of switching the conversation to more so talk to the actual perpetrator of the actual violence. So, you know, one question I do have for you, SP, is I've been hearing a lot of conversations from females in a sense, and I'm gonna bring it to you with you as well, Lisa, saying that if a woman, you know, spits on a man, or if a woman puts her hand on a man, you know, then she can only expect that man to be violent. How do you feel about that comment, SP?
I mean, that's a sticky comment, you know, especially if you're somebody who does have a platform like the radio or who is on TV. Like Stephen A., he got suspended for his comments. Mm-hmm. And even if it's true, like, I couldn't say that.
Right.
Not saying I don't think it is, or I think it is true, but, you know, it's always a sticky situation. At the end of the day, you just shouldn't touch anybody.
Mm-hmm. That's how I feel. I think the conversation needs to be less about, well, when is it okay for a man to hit a woman? Like, that shouldn't even be the conversation. It should be, how can we have healthy relationships, respect for one another? How can we not get in these, you know, violent situations? How can we prevent those things from happening? Not even get to that point where it's like, well, she did this and he did that. Because at the end of the day, when a domestic violence situation is going on, both the perpetrator and the victim are both, I mean, to me, they both are in a place where they should not be.
Right.
So I just think that we should have more conversation about people having healthy relationships and having respect for one another, where no one is hitting anyone.
Yeah.
No one's saying anything. Like, no one's being abusive verbally, physically, emotionally, any of that. Those things.
I kind of agree. It goes back to Whoopi Goldberg's comments, you know what I mean? Because she said, listen, if you hit a man, don't be surprised if he hits you back. That's Whoopi saying that, you know what I mean? That's which is crazy because she definitely played a part in The Color Purple, where she was in an abusive relationship.
I mean, her
tripping,
character,
you know
character.
I mean? I totally agree. I feel like just because you may have grown up in a situation where you may have been abused or you've seen that with your parents, you still have a choice. Mm-hmm. There's always a choice in the matter. And so I want to know what you all think out there. Give us a call, 821-1075, 821-1075. You're tuned in to Any Given Sunday on Power 1075.